All right, what's going on, beautiful struggle family? Welcome to another episode to the Beautiful Struggle podcast. We have another guest on the podcast today, and today we're going to be talking about tech and the tech industry. All right. So a little bit about our guest today. She's a self-taught software engineer who specifically focuses on the front end development, and she's also a freelancer. And don't worry, for all of you out there that are not into tech, we're going to break it down. We're going to get into it. We're also going to dive into why people are so excited about tech careers and tech jobs and whatnot. And hey, it might spark your interest as well. Um, but anyways, along the way, she's also been documenting her journey in the tech industry and sharing major lessons that she's been learning, especially as a Black woman breaking into tech. And she shares a lot of these information, these stories, and these gems on platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. TikTok being the one that I actually found her on, so which is pretty dope. Welcome to the podcast, Nicole Young. How are you doing today?
Hello, and thank you for having me. That was such a good introduction, and I didn't have to share any of that with you. So I think that's super cool that you were able
Yeah,
to find all that stuff out about me.
yeah,
But I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. We're excited to have you on. You know how to do it right. So, yeah. I mean, how are you doing today? How's everything going on before we hopped on? Before we hit record, you like it's a busy day. It's a Monday.
It is, yeah. Yeah, so I started a job about 4 months ago, and I've been kind of diving in. It's been a really fun experience. So I'm sure we'll get into it
Yeah,
later in the podcast, but just, ramping up some projects as the
yeah,
quarter, the new quarter kind of gets some momentum. So
yeah, yeah.
always
Dope, dope.
something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Before we jump into like your story and the whole tech industry and whatnot in your job, I see that you travel a whole lot, right? I think
Mhm.
a couple weeks ago I seen you was in New York.
Yeah.
Talk to us about you going to the Big Apple. How did you like it, New York? The reason why I bring it up because a couple weeks before you went, I was actually out there, and I'm just like, man, every time I come out here, I'm always so inspired, man. There's so much going
Yeah,
on, and it's just another world out there, really.
for sure. Yeah, I that was actually my first time in like my adult life, I think, that I've been in New
Really?
York. I used to go a couple of times to visit my sister who lived out there when I was younger, but she has since moved out of the city
Mhm.
once she started her family. So I have not been there in like probably over a decade.
Wow.
And it was a super fun experience because I don't remember ever going in the summer. So there's a
Hmm.
completely different energy in the city when it's nice outside.
Yeah.
People are doing, spoken word on the street, and
Mm.
everyone is doing great things. And one of my colleagues, so I was out there for work, and one of my colleagues is actually living out there. So he had
Mm.
a ton of great recommendations for where we should eat, which is
That's dope.
the highlight of my time out there.
Yeah, the
So
food
it was cool. I love it. And I love to have that flexibility and
for
freedom to
sure.
be able to travel sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
Mhm.
Yep, yep. So
Mhm.
love to get into your background. Talk to us. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up at? Yeah.
Yeah. So I am born and raised in Western Pennsylvania, primarily in the Pittsburgh area. So yeah, I've always been here. I went to school. I studied sport and exercise psychology
Mm.
at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia. So that was super cool experience. And yeah, I've always just been someone I'm interested in so many different things. So I try to just follow that curiosity. But
Mm.
yep, that's where I got started.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, with you being a very curious person, as I am as well, that's the reason why I have the podcast. I love to bring people who want
Mhm.
to learn about their industry and whatnot. What made you get into tech?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long story, but I'm
Okay.
gonna try to keep it brief. So I, like I said, was studying sport and exercise psychology in college, and in my mindset, I wanted to work with professional athletes and like help
Hmm.
them on the mental side of their game. I've always been interested in psychology, so that's the career path that I chose. I was on a track to get my PhD in that area.
Mm,
And I happened my senior year of undergraduate, I got an opportunity through the Fulbright program to travel to Southeast Asia. So I was in Malaysia
mm,
and teach English for a year.
wow.
And that's like a once in a lifetime, opportunity to get accepted into a program like that. So I put my PhD track on hold so that I
For sure.
could, I deferred my acceptance so that I could take that opportunity. But
And how was that experience?
it was amazing.
Mm,
It opened up the world to me. It was, I lived in a very small village that
mm,
was, like a rice village. So they harvested rice. I was like
mhm.
a few steps away from the jungle, was right behind the
Wow.
little, hut, like type house that I lived in. And I was there with a few other Americans in the
Mhm.
same program. And so I was a English teaching assistant. So kind of like a student teacher that we have here in
Right.
America in a school, very small school in rural Malaysia. And it was such an eye-opening experience. I got to interact with kids who some had never seen an American before. I got to share my cultural background with them as well. On top of being an American, I'm also an African American. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
um, I also, because there are so many, Malaysia is very culturally diverse. So
Mm,
they have a lot of races and cultures represented there. And so they have a lot of federal holidays that align with everyone's
mm,
different holiday schedules. So we had so much time off from school, and I was able to travel around other places in Southeast Asia while I was also there, working.
wow.
So it was awesome. And that experience kind of taught me just how much I enjoyed being more hands on with what I was
Mm,
doing and being kind of in that face to face interactions with people. And I felt like my career trajectory going the PhD route was going to take me a long time to be able to get to a place where I was going to be able to
mm-hmm.
be more hands on. So I put that on pause. I said, I'm not going to jump right into that again. I'm going to kind of explore a little bit and see what else is out there and what else I could do. And I came home and I didn't have a lot. Like I had spent all my money traveling
Mm,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
taking in that experience. So I moved back in with my parents and just started to kind of like network a little bit, explore. And I had a friend who had started a nonprofit working with high schoolers. So it was a very similar experience. So I just jumped in with that. And I was doing a lot of like learning how to do digital marketing in that realm.
Mm,
And I really enjoyed it. I started learning more about like social media and how to grow on social media, and just was kind of like just learning, just trying to
mm,
figure things out. And we were working out of a co-working space in Pittsburgh at that time, and I got connected with someone or with a tech startup that was using artificial intelligence while I was
mm,
working in that building.
wow.
And they had a position that was trained. They just needed a bunch of people helping to feed information to this artificial intelligence model so that it could kind of see things the way humans see them.
Interesting.
And I was like, okay, cool, I can do that. It's essentially in the same way, if you ever had the reCAPTCHA things that are like, hey,
Mm,
what's the stoplight, or what's the
yeah.
stop sign, like, and clicking those. It was very similar, where we were looking at images and labeling the things in those images. So it was very similar. It was
Mm-hmm.
potholes in the road or cracks in the road and things like that. So it was around roadway
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure. And I was just like, okay, this is easy money. I can do this. We're just like, teaching that artificial intelligence model. But because it was a very small startup, I had access to the developers and the people who were bringing this company
Mm-hmm.
to life. And I learned so much from them and just really fell in love with what we were doing and learning about the technology behind what I was doing. And it was one of those things. It just started to click. It was so interesting. And I had a moment where I'd never considered myself to be like a tech savvy person,
For
but I
sure.
was able to understand what was going on and learn, the little code snippets here and there that were helping to make everything go. And
Hmm.
I just was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I never, saw myself as someone that would be capable. And I never had anyone in my life that was in the tech realm that where I felt like it was accessible to me. So
Yeah.
I
For
just,
sure.
I really loved it. So I just ran with it. And that's kind of just where things took off from there.
Yeah, it's interesting because you say you don't really see yourself as like a tech savvy type of person, maybe in that moment, in that instance. But when people think of tech, they think of somebody sitting at a computer screen and just like
Yeah, just
putting in all
hacking
these
away.
code, yeah, hacking, putting in these codes, and like they got their hoodie on and whatnot. They don't come outside. But it's interesting because tech, if you we'll get into it a lot more, there's so many different components to it and so many different aspects, so many different careers what's in tech. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be sitting at a computer punching in and ones and zeros, right? Like, or and trying to hack somebody.
Exactly.
That's not necessarily the case. And I love the fact that your curiosity just kind of led you here, right? Based on the
Mm-hmm.
people that were around you and like what you were hearing and whatnot. So at this moment, you're learning a lot more about tech. You're probably feeling confident. You're comfortable with it. Probably the social media and the PhD, is that out the window? Like, where's your mindset going now?
Yeah, so that's what's funny. So the PhD, I basically never turned back. I never looked back on that. I
Mm,
kind of like put a
yeah,
pause on it and I had the time to really reflect on what it is that I want, what it is that like kind of fills my cup in a way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I realized that for that time being, and so far it has stayed that way, that school just wasn't like, that was the end of the road for me in terms of like a formal
Mm,
education. And but what was funny is I was still very much involved with that nonprofit that I had started with. So I was still very interested in social media before I got
mm,
a full-time position at that startup.
mm,
And so as I started gaining just that knowledge and learning from those people that were around me,
mm,
I did start to kind of like, hey, like I'm starting to learn this thing. And we had like some of the developers in the startup would have like a lunch and learn once a week or so, and just like,
mm,
okay, like we use Python here, what does this mean? Like, what are some Python commands? And just kind of like feeding a little bit of that information to us and getting us started. And we
mm,
had access to courses online that the company had bought just to refresh any of the developers or whoever was
mm,
interested. And I was like, okay, cool. This is a free, I have
yeah.
free access to all this stuff. And so I just was like, in my free time, picking things up and learning what I could. And um, it was just kind of through that I was like, I want to share this with more people. I didn't
Yeah,
know a lot of people like me or that looked like me
for sure.
doing, code or building startups using artificial intelligence at that time. So I just was really hungry for community in that sense. And
Mm,
social media was a way that I was like trying to find that. And so I was using like the hashtags and things like that
mm,
to try to like pinpoint what I was learning with the larger, world. And
mm.
eventually it did start to pick up and it just started to grow from there.
Yeah, for sure. So let's dive into a little bit about what you were learning. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
developer coding. You mentioned Python. These are some terms that I don't know if everybody on the podcast knows what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love for you to like break down what a developer does, what's
Yeah.
Python, what's specifically a front end developer, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first got started, I didn't even understand, fully what those things were. So I completely get it. Like, um, essentially when I started, I was learning primarily Python, and Python is it's a engineering language that or programming language that you can use for a lot of different things. And it is a popular language that is used for artificial intelligence
Mm-hmm.
and machine learning. So a lot of times, when you're trying to build something very quickly that you need machine learning or artificial intelligence, Python's a good language to use to get started with that because without going too deep into the details, it's a language that is closer to what we understand as humans
Mm.
than the language the computer
Yep.
speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Where there are other languages out there that involve a lot more like process and deep diving because it's more closer to the ones and zeros that the computer
Mm-hmm.
speaks, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so I was just, okay, I'm learning Python or I'm learning JavaScript. And I was just kind of picking things up, but um, it was a few months before I understood like the full kind of journey that has to happen to go from an idea to like an
Mm-hmm.
actual website or application. And when I started to understand how that worked, I realized that there's multiple different elements of development and engineering. And so there's what we call the front end. That's the parts that we see as
Mm.
when we're on the internet, we're going on people's websites, we are on our phones, on the applications that are there. That's the front end. That's the
Got it.
user interface. And that's the part that is created to give us the experience that we need to have
Mm-hmm.
to be able to understand what's going on and see the information that we're trying to find.
So
Um,
just if I can hop in real quick. So for
yeah.
the people out there, front end developer, essentially, if you're on, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram, you guys are kind of developing what we're seeing, what we're engaging with, the scrolling, the stories, and things of that nature, right? And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, a back end developer is the person that's developing the things on the back end of it. So
Right.
front end is the things that you see that you're interacting with and that you're
Mm-hmm.
engaging with. Just want to clear that up for the audience out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was
Yeah, yeah,
perfect. So exactly. It's exactly how it sounds. The front end, it's
yeah,
that the part that you see. And then the back end, it's a little more, it can get a little bit more
for
complicated in
sure.
terms of like what you might be doing. But like the fact that you can go and look at old messages in your phone. A backend
Mm,
developer builds the database that holds that information so that your phone can go access it later on.
interesting.
Um, or just building the algorithms. I know people hear a lot about the
Mm,
Instagram algorithm and this, that, and the other. They're the backend developers and the machine learning specialists are who creates those algorithms to learn your behavior so that they can keep feeding you more and more information that favors what you like.
mm,
So yeah, that's like
interesting.
the simplest way to put it, but it can get really complicated and there are like a lot of specialties along that journey, but
No doubt, no
yeah.
doubt. Okay, I love it. So when did you start to freelance? You're at this startup, you're learning a lot. Did you
Yeah.
transition out of there? Did you say, "Hey, I can do this on my own. Let me start freelancing"? What
Yes,
happened? What was that transition like?
that's a great question. So what happened was, despite the fact that I was learning a ton at that startup, as the company grew, obviously, like, you have growing pains, and we had
Mm,
changes in leadership and changes in um, the the goals and things that were driving us as a company. And I started to realize that the direction that the company was going was not in alignment with what my values were
mm,
and things like that. And the work culture actually became more and more toxic for me as I started to
mm,
work. It was like very hustle culture driven, where it's like I was expected to work after hours if they needed me. I was expected to
wow.
do all that without having any change in my position or my payment or compensation, anything like that. And there was also a lot of conversation around hiring and diversity. There was a lot of like um hiring from the inside, so like a lot of nepotism, like, oh, I'm going to hire my friend, I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And um we had a severe lack of diversity. So everyone started to look the same as we grew as a company. And I was the only African American woman on the entire team for the majority of my time there until I got a little bit of hiring power and I was in a management position where I could bring more people on. And I did try to partner with programs in the area that could help us connect with more people that were of diverse backgrounds. But there was a lot of pushback from leadership to continue initiatives like that. So
Wow.
it was interesting, and it did put me back. And I got to a point where it was just like, I can't keep doing this. And you really, it's hard to fight a system when leadership is not in alignment with that same thing. And a lot of change within an organization has to happen from the top down. And me being where I was in the totem pole, it wasn't really going up the way it needed to. So it got to a really toxic point, and I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I left that company, and I didn't have a huge a game plan of what was going to happen after that, but I did know I wanted to continue to learn how to code. And it just so happened that when I left my job, it was right before the holidays in 2019, and then the pandemic hit like a few months later. So I am so grateful that I had kind of a little bit of time to learn, figure some things out. And so then when the confusion of the pandemic happened and people were starting to kind of scramble to build their presence online, I just took the knowledge I knew about social media and the knowledge that I was learning through with the front end development that I was learning throughout the holidays and things like that. And I just started to try to find clients. So I did that by, reaching out to old people in my network, people that there was a lot of small business owners in the co-working space that I was working in and I had built connections with. And I just, started to reach out. Hey, just so you know, I do this thing too. And I would love to work with you if you need help. And, the church that I grew up in, just helping them with things like that. And I just started to kind of whatever I could within my network of friends and family, just I needed work at that time. And I have these skills, and it actually really worked out because I was able to gain more real world experience and development, while also helping people and in a way that fulfilled me. So that's something I definitely advocate as you're learning, is trying to get that experience as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that because I think that's a gem in itself. If you have a skill, if you have a certain level of knowledge about something that you may feel like, oh, this is normal. Like I know this. I think everybody else should know this. A lot of
Right.
people probably don't, right? And that's an opportunity for you to make money, to connect with people, or to even educate people, right? Like if you have,
Right.
like you said, you have a certain level of knowledge about developing or being a developer, that opens up doors for you to connect with people, and to freelance and whatnot. And eventually you started sharing that information online, correct?
Yeah.
And like you said, you started building that community. I'd love for you to talk about that and how you're really empowering people to step into to tech and to, get the job, help people get their dream job, right?
Yeah. So one thing I had to learn, and this was not something that came naturally to me, because I do have people ask me well, how did you get that confidence? And how much did you know before you kind of ran into that? And I didn't know a lot, and I didn't think I knew a lot, but what you have to realize is as you learn those skill sets, you're going to know more than the next person.
For
Probably,
sure.
you're going to start building that expertise, and it might not feel like you're ready yet, but the quicker you can kind of jump into getting that experience, the faster you'll get to that place that you inevitably want to be. So I always try to push people to do that. And as I was kind of sharing the experiences that I was having online, I received a lot of questions and messages, and people reaching out to me telling me that it was impacting their journeys. And that was all I wanted to do. I never would have thought tech was where I would end up.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have access. I didn't have any, representation around me. And I didn't know, just because
Mm-hmm.
of that, I didn't know that there were so many options out there. I thought you had to be that hacker,
Mm-hmm.
really smart, like super mentally, enabled person to be in the tech space. And I, just by having a little bit of access at that time, the time that I did, made me realize that I am capable of this,
Mm-hmm.
and that I can learn it, even if I don't know it right now, that there are plenty of resources out there for me to figure it out and learn it. And I just wanted more people to have that, to have that kind of access, to have the little window to see into what's actually going on in
For
tech,
sure.
that it's accessible,
Yeah.
and also that it doesn't have to look like you getting a 4-year degree. It can look
Mm-hmm.
like bootstrapping your way through it, using online resources, or getting a mentor or something like that. I wanted to show, especially people of color and women, that we can do it,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it is because of a lot of gatekeeping that has happened for so long, that we don't feel like we belong in these tech spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that experience where I was the only in the room, the only
Mm-hmm.
Black woman in the room. And I know that there are so many other people who go through that as well. Um, and I thought I was the only one, but when I started to grow and gain those connections, I
Yeah.
was reassured that no, we're all going through this.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, if I can do my part to help more of us get those experiences, and kind of reach out to get those opportunities, that eventually we won't have to worry about us being the onlys in the room. We'll be
Yeah.
able to kind of enrich the spaces that we're in, with our culture and our experiences. So, yeah.
No, for sure. It's crazy because the other probably like last week I was having a conversation with somebody. Oh, he's Dominican and he used to work in the tech space, and something that he wanted to do is he felt that, I mean, we all feel that representation is very important. When I say us, I
Yeah.
mean you, me, him, we all feel it's very important. So he posted on his LinkedIn his salary at his current position that he was working at, and
Mm-hmm.
he was making over like $300,000 a year at his position,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it went viral. It got like a bunch of views and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, and the company contacted him. But he said, out of like all of that, he said the most empowering thing that happened was another young Dominican man reached out to him and was like, "Yo, I never knew that someone that looked like me, that came from where I came from, can make that much money." And
Mm-hmm.
that empowered him to, start his journey in tech, right? So I agree with you. I say all that to say, like, representation is very important. That's why I wanted to bring you on. And I love what you're doing. You're helping women of color get into this space and making them feel empowered that they can
Yeah.
do this, right? And that we
Mm-hmm.
need more of us in this space. So
Mm-hmm.
love that. Love that. I also want to transition a little bit and talk about, why tech is important and why are there so many people wanting to jump into tech. It's like you jump on
Mm-hmm.
TikTok and everybody got a video of like how much money I'm making, my day in the life. It
Mm-hmm.
looks like a cool job or industry to be working in,
Yeah.
but I want to make it practical for people out there. Why is it
Mm-hmm.
important, and why should people consider it if they're kind of like lost in the sauce right now? They don't really know
Yeah.
where they want to go next.
Absolutely. So I want to start off by, saying that, like, when you look around you, there's probably not one room in your house, not one uh, life experience that you go through where you
Mm-hmm.
don't have some type of technology around you,
Yep.
that's enabling you to do your daily things, your daily life. And that is true for every industry that we that we rely on in
Mm-hmm.
in the world. Technology it's a unique industry because it impacts every other industry. So there's tech in healthcare, there's tech in marketing, there's tech in the travel industry. It's everywhere. And not only, it's helping make our world more accessible. So like through TikTok, we are able to see so much more of life for other people than we ever have been before. Same for any social media. And also there are things like artificial intelligence and machine learning that is helping to automate things that we needed human power to do for so long. And it's just making our world one that it's more automated, it's more connected. And that is why, in general, technology is important. When you kind of dig deeper into that, in terms of, getting into the tech industry, it really can be super overwhelming. And even now, I know that if my journey was shifted on like time wise, even just a little bit, I don't even know if I would have made it as far as I did, because there is so much information out there now than there was when I got started, just even a couple of years ago. And it can be confusing about where do I start, or, what industry is right for me and what path should I take. And what I will say, number one, there's a big misconception that if you are someone making a shift into the tech industry, that you have to pursue a technical role. And that's not true at all. So you don't have to necessarily learn how to code. You don't have to learn how to do data analytics or something like that. A lot of times you can start with the skill set you already have. I have a lot of people in healthcare that reach out to me about wanting to switch into tech. And I understand, a lot of the messaging out there is, oh, you should go learn how to code so that you can do this. But you could probably take the information and the skill set that you have from your healthcare job and just position yourself just a little slightly so that you're more in a tech space. And the biggest thing that I want to get across with all of my social media and the platform that I have is that there is a space for you in tech, no matter what your unique gifts and talents and skill set is. Like for me, I ended up, I learned how to code, I did all of that. And now I'm in a position that's a marketing job that also helps me to utilize the video editing and storytelling skills that I have. So, and it's a tech job and I'm making, well over 6 figures and all of that, but it just, you have to find that unique place. And it doesn't always happen in the linear way that we might think it will. But I would say if you are interested in getting into tech, to number one, just remember like who you are. What are the things that fulfill you? What are the gifts and talents that you have? And then start to really probe and ask the questions that you need to ask to find what is out there that might already suit you. Because I think there are fields in tech that get a lot of shine, things like development and data analytics, and even like tech recruiters. Those are just roles that are very prominent in social media and all of that. You see that, but there are so many jobs in tech, and even I'm learning new positions every day about within the job that I'm in. So whatever your skill set is, I bet any money that I have that it could be applied in a tech space in a way that was meaningful. So I definitely just promote like trying to find your unique space in tech.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I have to ask this question. I feel like I wouldn't be doing the audience justice if I do, but in tech, it's a great career path. It's a lot of potential to make money, but there's also a lot of risk. There's a lot of startups, and there's also a lot of layoffs, right? I mean, we're seeing it right now in the news. A lot of big companies are laying off 10, 11% of their employees and whatnot. What are your thoughts about that? Is it a big deal in your eyes? Yeah, talk to us more about that. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. So I definitely feel like one thing I've learned being in the tech space so far is that you can't get comfortable. And
Mm,
I honestly think that in general, and this is tech or otherwise, that gone are the days that our parents had where you got in a job and stayed in it for decades
yeah,
and retired from that same job
for
or
sure.
whatever it was. So I do think like you shouldn't get comfortable, and you should always have a backup plan, or just a way to make sure that you can always support yourself. And so in that way, yes, there is risk. But I think that what you would be able to learn from those positions, I think tech is a fast-paced industry.
For sure.
And um, when you kind of look at how much you would be able to learn in a year of a position versus, the more antiquated models that we kind of maybe grew up
Hmm.
seeing, I think you're going to learn so much more. And what I realize is that no matter what happens in the job I'm in right now, I have skills that are
Yeah,
needed,
that's the
and that
key.
are, that people need. And so no matter what, I feel
Hmm.
like this job could go tomorrow and I would be able to figure something out with the skills that I have to get back to a place where I'm comfortable, or I'm building back up. So
Yeah,
I think that's just what's important, is making sure that you really hone in on your skill set and try to uh, develop a skill set that can be competitive no matter what
hmm,
happens in the industry. Those things are inevitable, I think, in the tech industry, especially if you are in the startup world, which is
yeah,
mostly what I've been in so
yeah,
far. There is a lot of shakiness around, like, will this job be here tomorrow? So I get
yeah,
it.
absolutely. No, I love that. And that's something that you talk about a lot. We talk about a lot on this podcast is like we need to develop skills because skills pays the bills, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, once you have that skill set, a transferable skill set, you know,
Mm-hmm.
who says that you can't freelance like you did or find another job, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely love that. In addition, I know on your platforms like YouTube and TikTok, you help people jump into tech. Could you break
Mm-hmm.
down specifically how you do that through
Yeah.
your content? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been actually playing around a lot with what more I could do. So if you do follow me on those, you'll probably see more content where I'm trying to dig a lot deeper than I
Hmm.
can just with social media. But basically my main goal is to help people just with that getting started point of like, you are trying to figure out where your place is, you're trying to figure out where to start.
Do you have a
So
podcast?
I don't.
I think you might think about that. I
I
think you I
should. Oh
think
my
I
goodness,
think
I
you'd
would
be
love
good
to have
for
a
it
podcast.
because I mean, I'm just thinking right now, like helping people of color break into tech, hearing it from a black woman, I mean, that's really empowering and that there's a community of people out there. And like you said, you can only say and do so much on social media, but long
Mhm.
form content or like 20-minute, just a thought, just a thought. Maybe I'm biased.
No, that's actually, I've thought about it a couple of times, and I have an idea of a podcast I would do if I
Yeah.
did, but that might be the confirmation I need to really put
Okay.
it in action.
Okay.
So I
Sorry to cut
appreciate
you
that.
off. Sorry to cut you off.
No, yeah, but yeah, so on my YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of content around getting started, just understanding the language that you have to speak to understand what's going on in tech. So,
Mhm.
what is a programming language, and what programming languages are out there? What actual tools do you need to get started on your learning journey? And I have a few like free resources that I provide that you can
Mhm.
download, and it kind of takes you on a career trajectory path, and it
Mhm.
tells you, how to go from where you are and using whatever it is that you have right now, and just slowly applying more of that technical skill to it as you start to learn it. I share, what resources I've learned from and the ones that I like the best, so that you don't have to waste your time trying to go through, courses that aren't so good. And on my social media, on Instagram, I share a lot of like the the here and now of like
Mm-hmm.
what's going on in my journey. And on TikTok, I'm fairly new to TikTok, but trying
Mm-hmm.
to get more into that educational space there too, just sharing what I know and how I've gotten to where I'm at now. So yes,
That's
and
dope.
just trying to figure out how I can, like I said, just be more impactful in
Dope.
the time and space that I have. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Okay, we can start wrapping this thing up pretty soon. A couple more questions. Talk to us about a recent failure you had and how you overcame it.
Mm, that's so good. Okay. So in the position that I'm in right now,
Mm-hmm.
I a lot of the reason why I took the job was because of the people that I thought I would be working with. And main
Mm-hmm.
mistake is kind of putting too many eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've only been in that job for 4 months, and a lot of the people who I was kind of reliant on and wanted to join this company for aren't even there anymore. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
they're gone. And I starting off in that role, I like I said, I feel like I put too many eggs in one basket where I was automatically just being reliant on those people, and now they're not there anymore. So I wasted a lot of my first quarter, uh, you know, not building relationships outside of like those people that were really comfortable and nice,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to connect my own dots, but relying on someone else to connect the dots for me. So I feel like that was a huge fail. And like looking back on it, even right now, it's like, okay, I see what I did wrong. And I kind of like kicked myself a little bit because it's like, you should have known, like, you can't, like
Right, right.
just assume that things are going to be a certain way, regardless of what it seems like at the beginning. But I think
Mm-hmm.
what I'm learning from that now is just how to really take control of my career trajectory. And I feel like I've done that in a sense in so many ways, but as you reach new levels, you have to kind of adjust the way you do things. So
Mm-hmm.
just adjusting the way I am taking charge of my career trajectory and utilizing the space that I'm in now to make sure I'm always going in the direction that I want to go. And if not, how do I
Mm-hmm.
recalibrate? So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Love that. Love that. All right, like I said, we can start wrapping this thing up. One thing I always have my guests do for the audience is leave the audience with one last gem, one last piece of
Mm,
advice. It could be tech related, career related, life, whatever you want, and we'll end it on that note.
wow. Oh, that's, I could leave you with a lot, but I would say life is too short to do
Mm,
things that you in your heart know you're not supposed to be doing. I would
mm,
say um always follow your heart or your gut or whatever your source is. Always follow that and make sure that you are in alignment with who you are supposed to be, because there will always be jobs, there will always be things out there. So don't uh sell your soul in a sense
mhm,
to fit into somebody else's mold. Always make sure that you are taking charge of who you're meant to be in your journey in this world, whether that be in tech or whatever your career is.
I love that. I love that. That's deep. Where can people reach out to you? Leave them with your social media handles, and I'll put everything in the description of this podcast. But talk to the people, let the
Absolutely.
people know where they can reach out to you.
So on the internet, I go by Nicole.Young. So on Instagram and YouTube, that is Nicole with a period Young. And
Mm,
then on Twitter and TikTok, it's spelled out because you can't use the period
yeah,
in the handle. So it's
cool, cool,
DOT. Yep.
cool, cool. With that being said, I appreciate your time once again. Phenomenal conversation. And it's your boy Chris, and I'll catch you guys next week. Peace.
Thank you.